All of us at BAFTA are so thrilled and proud of your success. So thank you for being here, Benedict, and we can't wait to hear what you've got to share with us.
So thank you so much. That feels like coming home. Thank you.
Now, every great acting career has a notable beginning. And one of yours was at your all-boys boarding school playing Titania, Queen of the Fairies, in Midsummer Night's Dream. Now, what do you remember about that production and that period in your life and how it put you on the path to your acting career?
I remember that the deputy housemaster said, well, you don't stand a chance. It's very competitive. It's a very high level. And I thought, I'll show you. I'll show you that I can play the Queen of the Fairies in an all-boys boarding school, age 13. I mean, I counterbalanced it with being quite physical. I mean, I was an athlete. I was in the rugby teams and cricket teams and all sorts of other things, and was part of the corps and did lots of manly stuff, let's put it like that. So I sort of got away with tottering onto stage, being very epicene and wearing a wig that looked a little bit like Cleo Lane, crowned with a kind of cut paper pineapple, I seem to remember, sort of what it looked like.
And here's that picture now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not going to be like that tonight, is it?
It might be.
I might get back on the plane.
But you were part of the Harrow Drama Club, the Rattigan Society, which maybe doesn't get enough praise in your sort of rise to success. What were some of the instincts and lessons you learned in those days which still sustain you now in your career?
Well, I mean, just going back, well, the Rattigan Society was mainly a theatre-going society, but it was also run by Martin Tyrrell, who was a truly inspirational teacher, an English teacher of mine. And he mainly had charge of, in very loose brackets, the modern sort of output of drama, at the school. Every year there was a traditional, and I mean, we literally recreated the Elizabethan stage, the Globe stage. We had two pillars, we had an antique, everything of the detail of what Sam Wanamaker was actually at that time recreating on the South Bank, which is now obviously modern version of the Globe Theatre. And he used to come to the school. That was an extraordinary tradition. We had this sort of costumes, Shakespearean costumes, which had come from period dramas from the BBC or from other kind of films or theatrical enterprises. I mean, we were incredibly lucky. And then at the head of all of this was this amazing teacher called Jeremy Lemon, another English teacher, a very, very, very knowledgeable, well-respected Elizabethan scholar who just happened to be quite a good actor as well, a very good actor, great actor, but he would teach you by rote. He would literally give you line readings, which, to start off with, if you're 13 and you're looking at Shakespearean, I was about to say prose, but blank verse, it doesn't read like prose. There's something alien to it. Obviously, there's the most extraordinary words or newness of these words. Anyway, long story short, this man made it read like prose. So the next year, when I auditioned for Rosalind in As You Like It, I don't know. Apparently, I was the best one since Vanessa Redgrave. So I knew what I was reading because it literally had been opened to me, like unlocking a code, a key to it. It just read fluently like modern prose. And that was him, that was Jeremy, that was his thoroughness. And a lot of other very smart students who had done those productions a few years in a row. But going back to the Rattigan Society, we used to take trips into London, which was just wonderful because it was the bright lights, it was, everything, the yearning of wanting to be an adult, and also it was my parents' world. It was my world that I wanted to go into as well. It was being in the audience of often really great productions like Penelope Wilson starring in The Deep Blue Sea. I remember going to see that. I remember seeing 3 times I went to see Stephen Delane's Hamlet, which was the most extraordinary. So that was one thing. It was just like this wonderful thing of, oh, okay, that is actually a realizable profession, and it's something that all my peers who were a bit kind of like, well, whatever, sometimes after they'd seen something, they were utterly transfixed and transformed by it and couldn't stop talking about it. And I thought, yeah, I'm good. I'm glad this is what I want to do, really, really inspiring. And then we do these extraordinary productions that Martin would direct, everything from City of Angels, that great, great musical, which is just about to have a comeback in the Donmar. God, what else? I started, well, once my voice broke, I went very quickly to playing old men. I played Willie Loman at 16 and a half. I played Arthur Crocker Harris in the Browning version, the Rattigan play, when I was all of 18. So yeah, and then carried on that tradition at university. I played Crap in Crap's Last Tape when I was 21. It's ridiculous, but it was a lot of fun. So yeah, I guess it taught me a hell of a lot. And as far as craft goes, just the amount of variety, the amount of imagination and hatbox variety of transformation and challenging work to do and roles to play, it couldn't have been better. Also, we didn't really have a proper theatre until my last year, so it was making do. A lot of it was making do in these odd spaces. So acoustically, they were very peculiar, and sightlines were odd, and sometimes they were very, very small, intimate studio spaces, and other times they were big kind of speech rooms or sort of auditoriums like this. So not swish as this, but you know, and that was good. That was good. It was like a sort of obstacle course, a kind of way of grafting a little harder to achieve your ends. So I think that paid off great dividends and carried on into the stuff we did as students at Manchester. Same kind of scenario, no theatre. We had libraries we used, we had church halls, streets, meeting rooms in the student union. I mean, all sorts of found spaces, and then would create something, whether it was in traverse or T-shaped or on a thrust or the traditional sort of pros arch approach of front-on playing that was really, really gave me a great deal of learning as to how to, you know, exist on stage in a live auditorium.
You interrupted your acting studies to take a gap year teaching in a Tibetan monastery in Darjeeling, India. How did that experience shape your worldview?
It's full. That was like a magic trick. I really am very jet-lagged. Wow. I mean, I don't think we've got all night, have we, really? That's a big question, a big answer as well. It was the most extraordinary experience. I was 19, and it was sort of a continuation, I think. It's all acting experience. It's all, I mean, anything that life teaches you that really touches you deeply and profoundly can be drawn upon and used somehow in your work, I feel. And the amount of connectedness and alertness and awareness and being present in a moment that whole culture of Tibetan Buddhism that I was teaching in and observing every day, and by the end practicing on retreat for a 2-month retreat, has served me every single day of my life, whether I'm working or not. So that's huge, massive, without me going into the basic tenets of Tibetan Buddhism, because that would take a long time. It's such a profound gear shift as well to obviously our Western sensibilities to live that sort of stoically, really. I mean, there's something very basic and grounded and focused and in kind of great integrity in everything that they do. So amazing to be amongst that kind of grace as well. And taught me a hell of a lot, and I owe them a lot. I owe them more than I gave them, because it was a very unfair exchange. I mean, we had fun. I made them laugh. They thought it was great fun to have this sort of odd, eccentric English schoolboy in their midst. But I think, you know, I definitely learned a lot more than they did. Karma-wise, I need to probably go back and teach for an entire lifetime to make up for the 6 months of learning I had from them. But it was a truly profound experience, and an experience, highs and lows as well. I mean, I'm an only child, but I've always been very gregarious. This was a very lonely experience at times, though, very lonely. The language and cultural gap was very, very large at times. Some of them spoke quite good English. And physically, geographically, there were other students my age who were on similar placements in and around Darjeeling, which is where it was in West Bengal. But they were about an hour's jeep ride at the sort of nearest away from me. So you just had to get on with your week, planning your lessons, building bits of classrooms, whether it was, you know, chairs or blackboards, and class structure and how the hell to teach when you don't speak the mother tongue very well, if at all. Was tough, was really tough, but you kind of fall back on hopefully some of what you might have learned at school. You realise how pampered you are very quickly at school. This thing of character building at boarding schools, I mean, everything's handed to you on a plate. You've got a routine. You put your clothes in a bag and then it comes back folded and laundered. I mean, it's absurd. You know, there's nothing of washing powder at public schools. You don't get your hands dirty. So it was great, and I thrived on that. I actually really enjoyed that aspect of it. Yeah, I could go on all night about Tibet. It was amazing.
Armed
Old
with
Indian.
this spiritual and theatrical background, you first make your breakthrough in theatre, doing classic plays at the Almeida, the Royal Court, and the National. Ultimately, having perhaps your biggest stage success in Danny Boyle's Frankenstein. What was so special to you about that heralded play?
The chance to play both roles, to have that experience with Johnny, was just extraordinary. To be able to be having to literally swap mindsets, to trust the other actor doing the same thing that you did the night before, and having a completely different experience either side of that mirror was magic. The level of physicality was great. I mean, I'd previously played roles. I think every role requires an actor to have some kind of physicality that's focused, whether it's their own or something very different from themselves. So, but what I mean is, I'd done specific work with, well, for example, playing Stephen Hawking, which was similar, but this was another level. This was evolving something from, well, it's just trying to basically completely strip away any idea of how to use a body, so you're utterly alien to how you inhabit it. And that whole experience, that whole experimentation with what it would be like to be born utterly naive and fresh, but in a body that's seen 35 odd years of existence, was a real challenge. But I said to Danny, I only want to do this if it's for both parts. You know, I want to have the stretch in both arenas. And it's an amazingly powerful story. I mean, it's just such a beautiful book and could teach us all about humanity. I hate the way it's been hijacked as this sort of totem for bad science. You know, it's actually about bad humanity, which of course is bad science, but it's simplified into being, Frankensteinian GM crop food or chemical preservatives. You know, it's I hate the way it's been linked to that, because Frankenstein's motivation,
headline, hasn't it?
yeah, but just vilify. I mean, it's become a byword for something bad, and what happens to him is something tragic. It's not innately evil. Do you know what I mean? He's not a mad scientist going, "It's alive, it's alive." I know he does that in the film, but you know. In the book, it's very much about the psychodrama of a child who loses his mother and is betrothed to the woman who passed on her sickness to the mother that died. So he becomes obsessed with this idea of bringing death back to life, because it's his way of controlling loss, which, as anyone knows who's ever grieved or experienced the loss of a close one, it's a terrible thing to come to terms with. Is you have no control over death and its effects. So it's a tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy. He creates this beautiful, innocent symbol of what humankind could be at its most innocent, and it's corrupted by everything that it meets. And again, it's about the nurturing influences rather than something that's innate. So, you know, I thought that what Danny and Nick did with their version of the script was obviously very much focused on the creature's story. But I think there were touches of the delicacy of the Doctor that I loved playing as well. So it was just a thrill, and it nearly killed both of us. It was so painful. It was so painful. I've still got scars. I've got a cut on my somewhere around there. And we had this original thing at the beginning of the play when he comes out of the skin. I don't know if you guys have seen the live version of it in cinema or lucky enough to see it in the theatre, but it basically began with this birth, and he came out of this womb-like structure, and it was just onto this sort of matting, this bit of flooring. But in the original, when we did the first tech run of it, it was a sort of basin of amniotic fluid, this kind of jelly stuff you get on kids' TV programs, you know, like gunk. Hey kids, it's gunk, you know. But it looked like this weird, horrible birthing fluid. So you came out dry, or with a bit of that on, and then into this pool. And it didn't work very well, because it was like basically being a baby seal on board a ship that was tilting like that. You kind of got out and you just skidded. I skidded across the stage. And it was all very all over the place.
Not the most dramatic stage entrance,
which was fine. Well, no, it was very dramatic. And then, you know, I recovered from that. And then sort of one of the stage hands was going, yeah, it seems to be getting bigger, the pool of liquor. Oh, no, that's blood. That's blood. You're bleeding. And I just literally sliced open part of my leg. Because Mark, God bless him, had made this beautiful set, but it was like razor blades. The wooden and metal slats just were like the nice little gap for a bit of, human-sized hair to...
You suffer for your
or
art.
human, as a piece of hair to be cut with. But listen, I mean, all the scars and hips going out of place. I had plantar fasciitis, which for anyone who doesn't know is a very big bally pain in the nerve of your foot, so you can hardly rest any weight on it. And we suffered for our art. We definitely suffered for our art on that one. But it was really worth it. Really worth it.
You created so many tremendous characters on television too. Stephen Hawking, you mentioned, Vincent van Gogh, Guy Burgess, but the one that's had the most global impact is Sherlock. Now, when you were approached to do this show, obviously this character is the most dramatized character in all of literature. So how did you set about the daunting task of putting your own mark on a character that's been played by so many other people?
By reading the books. And trusting Stephen and Mark, who are the sort of ultimate fanboys who kind of, when I first heard of the idea, it was an idea in itself, and I didn't know which writers were attached, which writers had actually come up with it. I thought, why fix something that ain't broke? I thought it could be just a scam to, reignite a franchise around an idea rather than just examine what's great about this detective. And then I read the script, and then I saw who'd written it and who'd come up with the idea. And I thought, I'm in very, very safe hands. These boys really, really know their stuff. And I went back to the books and I just asked them questions all the time. And I draw, Watson is writing this first person witnessing of this extraordinary creature, and it's very thorough. He's a doctor. He goes into physical detail about the way the man sits and postures, how fast he is, his mood swings, his temperament of every scale and size, and his brilliance, and also his failings. So it's a wonderful blueprint to work from. And a lot of it's drawn into the scripts anyway, but yeah, that was kind of it. And also just not to watch any other versions. Because, I grew up watching Jeremy Brett and the reruns of, everyone, Peter Cushing and, oh God, my mind's gone completely blank. Basil Rathbone, thank you very much. Watson. And they were there, definitely there. And I remember during the first sort of outings of trying to get him right and, see what to play with as far as levels, I would sometimes turn to Martin and go, bit too Brett, bit more, a little bit more Mike Lee than Brett. I don't know, because Jeremy was amazing, but it became something that was about him in the end. It was an extraordinary thing to watch, but knowing him as I did, because my mum was very good friends with him, known him most of his life, it was kind of tragic as well because of what he was suffering. And it's still extraordinary, and I still watch reruns of it now. I dare to watch them now, and I watch Johnny's as well. Not all of them, because there are so many. I wouldn't have time to do my own, but he's wonderful in it, wonderful. And that's the thing about the role, is to remember I was something like 74th, I think, or 5th. There've been many of us, so I'll get some things right, I'll get some things wrong, and that's it. Just have a go.
Let's talk about your film career now. You start off with great supporting roles in the likes of Starter for 10, Atonement, Warhorse, and it builds to bigger roles in great films like The Fifth Estate, Star Trek Into Darkness, through sort of 12 Years a Slave. It seems like the whole identikit approach, how to build a film career. But what decisions are you making when scripts are presented to you? Are you looking for a certain thing? Are you steering your career in a certain direction? What is it that makes you decide, this is the role for me each time?
Lots of things. What I've immediately done before, whether it's theatre, television, or film, and that's the other thing. I don't view film careers purely in isolation from the others. I've been lucky enough to be able to go back and flex muscles in those. So I don't know, but when I read a film script, I think it's many, many things. It's many things. I'm thinking very carefully because, of course, there's immediately when I often get asked when I'm talking about Alan Turing that, you played a lot of scientists, and I immediately get very defensive. And it's true, I have played a few, but not that many on film, actually. I played a very stupid man in the sense of Patrick Watson, Starter for 10. I've played a very sweet but kind of guileless guy, Little Charles in August Osage County, and Ford wasn't necessarily that smart. He was a broke man selling a slave to a known psychopath in 12 Years a Slave. So I kind of balk a little bit about that, but I have played Joseph Hooker, who was a botanist. Where am I going with this answer? I don't really know. How do I look at scripts? How do I think of what to do and when to do? It really does depend on lots of things. So it depends on who else is attached, who's written it, who's directing it, what I've done before, what the challenges of the role are, whether they're things I feel I haven't done before. I think it's the usual criteria, really. There's no. I don't have a secret formula, and I do just chase work that I want to do, or accept work that I want to do if I'm in that lucky position, which sometimes now I am. And it sort of worked out all right. But people ask me, so it's great the way it sort of all worked out. How have you planned it? And you can't. I mean, anyone saying that they've planned their career is kind of lying. There's so much of it that you have to let. You have to roll the dice, you have to take bets. I mean, I would do The Fifth Estate, for example, again tomorrow if I was asked to play Julian Assange in a film about him. However much it bombed and was a flop or whatever else, you want to term it, I'm very proud of being asked to do it and the work I had to do in it. So again, it was about doing the role, really. Not about calculating whether it would be a safe bet or, a career move. There are moments, of course, where you go, well, that would fit nicely with what I would then like to do. Say, if I want to do a big film and I know I'm going into Penry because I'm going back to doing some theatre, that's nice to calculate. But at the moment, I've just been really kind of riding the wave of roles.
You said that your film career doesn't
weird.
exist.
Riding the wave of roles.
So you're surfing through
the
showbiz,
rolling
Benedict.
waves. Yeah.
Yes, you're hanging 10 in Hollywood. You said that your film career doesn't exist in isolation, and I think that you're sort of rare among A-list actors that you keep going back to do radio as well. You do this wonderful radio sitcom, Cabin Pressure, you do Rumpole, you do sort of audiobooks. A lot of actors in your position wouldn't keep going back to radio. What is it about you, your discipline, your history, your decisions, that sort of leads you to not say, oh, I'm just doing movies now, but to have a career that deviates between theatre, film, radio, audiobooks?
The power of storytelling, you have a completely different focus when you're in front of a microphone. You're not concentrating on a shot, or you're not concentrating on this energy there in the live auditorium. It's very intimate, and you can you can have an awful lot of fun with it. I mean, actually, we do record Cabin Pressure in front of a live audience, but we rehearse it and talk about it before then on our own. It's just a completely different muscle to flex, and I think it all adds up. I mean, it took me a while at drama school to sort of be myself, rather than all these wonderful things I've been asked to do at school and university. So once I'd found that, I then I loved slowly after, because you have to, as an actor, when you're beginning your career, I think you have to step through the door and people have to go, right, well, that's sort of who you are, and you sort of, because of who you are right for this band of roles. And I was very nervous of that, because I never wanted to be an actor that was based around versions of myself. I wanted to have as much fun pretending to be anything other than myself as I could possibly have. Not to denigrate people who do that, and not to say that I don't like to do work that's close to myself. I'd love to do more of it now in the future, but I just felt, for me, and this does tie into the answer to your question, it's about being something other. It's about doing something that transports you and hopefully your audience with you. And when you're working with a microphone, you can get away with murder with your voice. Doesn't matter what you look like. You can have a lot of fun with it as well. And there's a very different kind of connection to the material. You're still working with other actors if you're doing a drama or a comedy, but if you're doing an audiobook, that's suddenly you're literally a painter with words, and it's your canvas, and that's fantastic. And I recently did a reading of The Spire, the William Golding book. And the other thing is, and I read it before I went in, obviously, to make my notes and think about things, but when you're reading it line by line, word by word like that, I personally, I don't know any other reading experience that's like that. So selfishly, because you then have to sort of give it to the rest of the world, it's a wonderful way to read a book. Every single dot and it's just amazing the detail you realize in the writing when you're reading it in that format as an audiobook. So yeah, that's one reason I do audiobooks, is to read books properly, I suppose.
Probably the only time you get to do it.
Yeah, I know, that's a very long way to read books, I have to say. But you know, it's in all seriousness, yeah, I think it does. It all adds to the enjoyment of being a storyteller, which is kind of what the craft's about, I guess, at the end of the day.
And what an amazing story you tell in The Imitation Game, your latest film. Let's talk about your performance as Alan Turing. How much does it matter to you that with this movie, you're able to give that man the glory, the acclaim, and the dignity that he was maybe robbed of in life?
Well, thank you very much. If we do that, then we can all go home happy. Thank you. It means a hell of a lot. I mean, I cared about him before I read this script and before I started playing him, but having this engagement with him was such a privilege, and I missed him. We filmed the end of the film quite near the end of my shooting schedule, and I grieved him, not as an actor grieving a role, but actually just or even playing the emotional beats of the scene. It sort of got out of control. I was leaning into something which was basically standing outside of the role and completely empathizing with what he'd experienced and just realizing the full tragedy of the end of his life. But to go back to a broader answer of the question, it means a massive deal to bring his story to a wide audience. The amount of people that have seen the film and are shocked by how little they knew of the full story and of his tragic end as well means that it's a story that needs to be told. I mean, this man is a hero. He should be, as Obama, I think in 2011 said, you know, he cited him with Darwin and Newton, and they've both got their faces on banknotes, and he's not on the front cover of textbooks, whether they're history books, social books, whether they're science books, and he should be. He really should be. He wasn't interested in self-publicizing. There was a moment, I mean, Andrew Hodges' biography, for anyone who hasn't read it, is a fantastic way into understanding the work and the man and the world, and was the book that the film was loosely based on, but fantastic source material for me. And you know, he talks about this. He had moments by which he could have stood up and said, look, this is what I'm doing with algorithms in particular. And he didn't. He chose to focus on artificial intelligence more. But even with that, you know, he was never interested in going, I'm the all-singing, dancing, not Pulitzer Prize winning, help me out, audience of clever people. Thank you. Nobel Prize-winning scientist that he should be. I mean, he's the father of the modern computer age. He's the father of computing, but he's also an incredible philosopher, scientific philosopher, and a technician, someone who was able to create his ideas, and with a huge amount of help, obviously, but also in his own right. And in the midst of all of that, the most extraordinary human being, someone who was utterly shaped by his circumstance, I feel. The more I think about him, the more I read about him, the more I do think about him all the time, especially with all the stuff around the film now. And it seemed to me that even from childhood, this child who had a stammer, how isolating, how difficult that would have been to just form the usual social bonds and have the ease of play and interaction, and how it's cruel enough now if you have a stammer, let alone in those not Victorian, but still pretty Victorian in principle times at those schools. And parents who were in the diplomatic, who were living a life that was very much the 19th rather than the 20th century. And he was born into a barbaric world during the First World War, and then fatefully entangled with the Second. And in the midst of all, that's this very sensitive child that needed a lot of love, that had a profound need for love, and that was denied him because of the appalling social parameters of the era, seeing homosexuality as being morally wrong and an illness, and something that was curable with estrogen injections, or at least punishable with estrogen injections. It's just barbaric, and yet sadly all too prevalent still now in any form of fundamentalist or extreme view. You know, the scapegoats, the ones who are scapegoated, are still the same minorities, and homosexual men and women are right at the forefront of that discrimination. And even, I mean, you know, even within our permissive society, if that's not too cold a term for it, you know, there's still a massive lack of equality, in my opinion. But anyway, the point is, he suffered all of that, and he didn't, even at that point, he didn't martyr himself. He just was very open about his sexuality, but he didn't ever parade it. He wasn't somebody who was making himself into a cause, and by which he became a great hero, a great standard bearer for that cause. And I just think there's so much of the world that we owe to him now, whether it's the things we hold in our hands, which we call phones, which are basically more powerful than all the computing put together that got us to the moon for the first trip. So it's an extraordinary thing that he began. And he was part of a lot of other people doing it. And I always have to acknowledge that, because he wasn't just on his own doing all of this work. Especially with the code breaking in the Second World War, he adapted what the Poles had already achieved with their code breaking machine. But without his adaptations, without his changes, we wouldn't have broken Enigma. That's a fact. And he was right at the forefront of the scientific endeavor to mechanize the whole code breaking process in the middle of the Second World War at Bletchley. And people have estimated that brought the Second World War to a 2-year early conclusion, thus saving near 14 million lives. I mean, that's an act of heroism. He didn't talk about it for 35 years. He couldn't talk about his sexuality. He couldn't talk about a lot of things in his life. He found it difficult to talk. He was incredibly contained and fragile. And so to be able to tell his story on the big screen and bring it to a wider audience, he may cower in embarrassment at the whole thing. But I'm in a wonderful position. I want to shout from the rooftops that what an extraordinary man he is. And I'm thrilled I've got the chance to play him. Really thrilled.
You're taking on the most complex character of all next year in London when you do your Hamlet at the Barbican. What does it mean to you that tickets for that sold out faster than tickets for One Direction and Beyonce combined?
If you liked it, then you should have put a redial on it. I don't know. It's wonderfully embarrassing, I guess. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Shakespeare at the heart of it, and it means that people might come and see that play who haven't seen Shakespeare before and revel in the extraordinary nature of that particular man and his dilemma. And hopefully we'll hold them in a spell that Lindsay Turner is already cooking up, which is it's fantastic, with a wonderful, wonderful production team. It means the world. It's very exciting. People say, well, you nervous? You a bit nervous? Well, no, it means I've got an audience, which is great. I mean, it would be much, much worse to put all that work in and go out and go, hello?
I mean, do you ever think about the contrast? You were talking earlier about doing Shakespeare in like tiny rooms and unconventional spaces.
Yeah. Well, the Barbican as well. The Barbican's an amazing theatre. It's an amazing theatre. That in itself is really exciting. We took a long time to choose it. And it's an international theatre of great excellence across mediums, whether it's dance, music, theatre, and film. So it's really found its home, and what we want to do with it has found its home there, which is very exciting.
Just before we go to questions from the audience, congratulations on your engagement.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
How does it feel to have broken the hearts of all the Cumber babes around the world?
I never thought I'd have a room full of people applauding me for the moment that I got engaged. It's very strange. C'est la vie for the weird thing that is my life. But thank you.
You must be pleased to have a supportive reaction from your fans.
Well, yeah, it's better than being booed, I suppose.
Now, if you have a question for Benedict, please raise your hand. We have roving mics in the audience on both sides of the theatre. And I'm going to ask Anna over there there's a question in your row, just there, Anna. Just wait for the microphone to reach you, please. Thank you very much.
I'm very, very curious to know about, considering all the different techniques and styles of acting out there, which one do you work with or choose? And considering that you come from a spiritual, strong background, do you incorporate that into your style?
I use all of them, really. I'm a complete thief. I'm a magpie. I don't have one particular process at all. I don't think I'd be able to do the amount of work or the variety of work that I'd like to do, that I'm trying to do, if I had one way of working.
Is there a process for you?
Yeah, but it changes every time.
Script.
Sometimes it's outside in. Sometimes it's getting the look or the sound or the physical feel of a character right. Other times it's the research. Other times it's just one sentence or one known fact about that person that becomes a sort of spiritual core or some kind of anchor for who that inner self is, and that then starts to dictate the choices that could be made in a situation that I may not make, but that this character would, and that voice then starts to speak a little louder, and I follow that. But a lot of it starts with instinct, and thankfully very, very, very good script. So immediately, it's as someone who I guess began with text, I always dig deep in that, and I'll quiz the writer if they're alive, if not directors and other people who know something about the dead writer, and then start to put on top of intuition, put on what that learning is. But it really, really does depend on the job. So, for example, with both Julian Assange and with Alan, I found it very difficult to know what to start with, because there's such a volume of work, of expertise, of brilliance in their field. There's anecdote and story, there's personality, there's also physicality for both of them, which is a whole, it's about, well, what do I do now? If I'm watching a film of, say, Julian talking, I suddenly then get drawn into the argument rather than the way his mouth moves, or what he may not sound like. It's rusty now, but anyway, it's that thing of just going, right, stop. I've got to stop listening to how he's saying it and just concentrate on what he's saying, or vice versa. So that's tricky. Sometimes they just work at the same time. It's terrifying, that, because you don't feel that you've got one thing that you're safe with. Everything's sort of cooking at the same time, and you're going, fuck, I've got to turn that one down a bit and put that one up a bit, But I reach out, I get a lot of help. I get a lot of help from brilliant, brilliant people, whether they're costume designers, whether they're dialect coaches, whether they're directors or writers. So I like working in isolation, but I like very much feeling secure that the homework I've done can be then brought into a collaborative field straight away, so that if a director says, no, that's not the direction I want to go in, the story's got to aim towards this beat or this focus, then I'm not getting too carried away thinking, oh, this is what the character is. And I know some actors do that. They work in isolation or with an acting coach, and then they present their work and that's it. And directors sort of, I don't know what function they serve then, but I like to lean on my directors and writers. Yeah, I could go on all night about that. That's the next BAFTA talk. What is your process? But varied. I don't have one way of working. I asked Meryl Streep after watching her in the scene I was lucky enough to be in with her in August Osage in the county, and she, having a cigarette on the balcony, I think it was around election night, and I said, I've got to ask you, just grassroots, cart and horse and cart, how the hell do you begin to put Vi together? How do you do, well, first of all, the effect of drugs, alcohol, grief? How do you do damage, and victim, as well as bullying, as well as comedian, as well as mother, as well as brutish, as well as sister, as well, all of these flavors, all of these things that were there, and that she just played with so delicately, like a conductor of her own orchestra of the character. It was remarkable to watch. Every take was different, but editable within its difference. And she went, oh, I don't really know. I don't really have a technique. Do you? I know a couple of others like that as well. I hope she won't mind me saying that. But yeah, no, and it's true. The woman that does the splits in Mamma Mia, who does that in that, who's aging and decrepit as Thatcher. You can't. I don't think you can go in with one method. And this thing of character acting or technical acting, this thing of method acting or, technical acting, I suppose, again. I don't see a divide anymore. I really don't. You have to commit, however technical, you have to commit to a belief in what you're doing at a moment where it becomes method. You believe in what you're committing to. There are days when that's really hard, when there are distractions, and if you're a method actor, there are ways of pushing those away. But again, sometimes in controlling things, you're actually losing the influences that could buffet you in a different direction if you aren't trying to control things through having one particular way of working. So, yeah, there are days when you do hold the reins a little tighter, and there are other days when you want to just run with it and see what happens. And see what other people give you as well. Otherwise, I think you can be closed off. If you come in with a really preconceived notion about... Sorry, I know people have got bladders. I'm going on for a very long time with this answer. If you have a preconceived notion, you follow that with a real obstinacy, I think you're cutting yourself off from such a wonderful experience of getting energy from your other actors, of understanding what they're bringing to the table, let alone your director, and then where a camera goes and all the other sort of technicalities that fit around that. And it depends. So some directors, they want to position you, and they say, right, we're just going to feel what this is like. It's going to be lovely. Now, if you just put your left finger up, and they're there, no, there, you're like, this isn't really, it's like photo shoots sometimes, but we just want you to be relaxed. Just sit back. No, not like that. Sit to the side a bit more. No, sit like that. No, uncross your legs. So in the end, you're sort of going, is this relaxed? Do I look relaxed? I don't feel relaxed. And that can be like that with directors as well. But the best of them know when to just, push a button and see what happens. And they can change your perception and shift you 180 degrees into the opposite direction, or leave you alone to just try bouncing around yourself. I mean, I just did, what did I just do? Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by the sun of York, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. I did all of that in one big take, and Dominic Cook, our brilliant director, just he came in and went, yeah, every now and again after a take, because he knew that I was trying, he knew, and we had very little time as well, criminally little time for that moment, but he knew it was deep-seated in me. He knew how I could play with the different directions, so he just let me get on with it. Other days it's more controlled.
Benedict was just referencing the next series, The Hollow Crown, in which you play Richard III. Thank you very much for your excellent question. Yes, there.
With all these amazing and unique roles you've been playing lately, is it hard to get into the right mindset of the character? And, is it somewhat hard to switch from a character like Sherlock Holmes to Smaug the Dragon?
There's enough. It's weird because you look at. Sometimes the output's very confusing because actually it's all right. You can sit down. I love it when people stand up for the whole of the answer. That's very sweet. But you rest your legs, my child. Rest your legs. I didn't mean to call you a child. You're a grown adult. I'm sorry. But the point is, yes, no. They are very different. But the point is that the work comes out very much in a different time frame to how it's actually done and put together. So there are gaps. There are huge gaps. And as far as getting into a different mindset, I think people. I shouldn't be saying this because this is really asking you to look behind the curtain and go, oh, it's like that, is it? That's a bit boring, and you will walk away and not be interested anymore. But basically, as an actor, we rely a lot on you projecting onto us. So the idea of you going, oh, he does that and he does that. Well, yeah, but with months apart, completely different criteria, completely different material. And as far as getting into the mindset, they couldn't be more different characters. I mean, one is a fire-breathing serpent, however many hundreds of years old, that flies and loves gold and hates dwarves, and the other one is a, sociopathic show-off and a brilliant mind and a wonderful consulting detective, the number one consulting detective. The job descriptions are so different that you can't help but get into different mindsets. There are often bleeds, because we are only this, however much we try to transform ourselves or lose weight, gain weight, change our body shape, movement, voice appearance, whatever the kind of mask work is, there's only a certain, there's this palette, that's it, that's what I've got to play with. So, there are moments where I can see certain bleeds between characters, but as far as mindsets, no, very, very different. And I think, the other thing of concentrating on material goes back to the spiritual element of how you read and understand what you're given and asked to do, which is to sort of excavate something whereby you hold yourself back and you let the character go further. One of the best experiences I've ever had was working with a theatre director called Katie Mitchell, who gave me more process than drama school did in many ways. I mean, she's sometimes infamously thorough for her process, because I'll give you an example. So a note session might go like this. No, darling, I wasn't sure about the temperature there. What was the temperature? And what was going on outside? Did you hear the neighbour's dog barking? I'm not sure. And were you conscious of the firstborn photograph on the dishwasher? No. Because it wasn't supposed to be there. It was supposed to be on the kitchen counter. Do you remember? I didn't see that. It's very, very specific detail. She gets you to give these incredibly detailed studies of the work you're doing. So I played this guy, I think he was called Chris, and a brilliant play by Martin Crimp called The City. And anyway, to cut a long story short, there was one scene where he's coming back to his wife, telling him he's been demoted. He's really humiliated, this character. He's working in a supermarket. He had a reasonably good city job. And he'd been made redundant. Part of the play was about the structures of family and power structures between the sexes, and also what happens to men, the emasculating effects of being made redundant. And he comes back to tell his wife about this day he's had in the supermarket, and he's talking about all his fellow employees who are having a go at him. And I started to character them. I started to impersonate them, do their voices and movements, and Katie was like, no. I know you can do that, but he can't do that, can he? It was a huge light bulb went on in my head. I went, oh yeah. It's the material is about honouring the character, not about showing off or doing something beyond it just to show, look, I can do that. You have to keep it grounded in the character. And when you're playing real people, there's a massive amount of integrity that comes with that, because you've got the legacy of it being a real story, of their story, which is a profoundly different pressure, but similar in the sense that some of the iconic fictional characters also come with a massive amount of people who believe they are as good as real, and you get them wrong at your peril. But at the same time, there's nothing quite like knowing that a family might be sitting and watching your work of their relative in the dark of a cinema. So, that focuses the mind pretty sharply. Yeah.
It's like a masterclass, isn't it? It's really good.
I thought this was supposed to
At
be.
the back
Oops.
there.
Sorry.
Thank you. You have explained it, so how you do what you do. And I was wondering if you could tell us, I know that depending on the method the actor uses, it takes more or less time to get into the whole mind of a character, and sometimes it takes a while to exit that. So I was wondering for you, especially because you've played characters that are so different, particularly a character like Khan in Star Trek, or any of your other characters, they're so different. How long does it take for you to get into a character and then out? Is there a?
Do you mean on a daily basis, or do you mean in rehearsals, building a character before shooting or being on stage?
If you could answer both, it'd be great.
Oh, I'll try to. Again, bladders, but I'll be quick.
Sorry.
Well, the main thing, I guess, on set, it depends what the day holds. I mean, the scenes that we did with Khan, for example, in the brig, I removed myself from the fun of being on that set, and it was a lot of fun. I just went to my little corner, my sort of prison corner, and just sat in my own thoughts and his thoughts. It's really hard. Sometimes, you can rehearse and plan and prepare really, really rigorously, and then you get to the day and you don't have a good night's sleep the night before, you have a tummy upset, or you have a bad bit of news. There's all sorts of obstacles which can really throw you, so you just sometimes have to trust that the work is there. What I'm saying is there's not one way of just clicking into it. Having said that, there are moments when there's a moment in makeup sometimes where you go, right, there he is. There's a moment where you're just going over the lines and you feel, okay, right, now I know how I want to begin this day's work. I know what I want to take to the director, and I know what I want to start with, and that's very satisfying. It can take all the way up to the third take to realise that, though. As far as being in character, I've always dared to try and come out of character to hear what I need to hear as an actor. I would find it, and I've tried it a few times, it is very confusing, and I find it very confusing if I did this all the time, to receive information from a director as a character. I can't compute that. I don't have that filter in my brain. I'm happy to step aside and then go back into something. But very often when I do that, I'm then playing a note, so I feel self-conscious and I'm not completely in character. The magic of camera and film and you guys often means I get away with it, but the point is that when it's at its best, every bit of the work is forgotten, and you are just sort of present in that moment. But yeah, it could be a voice, it could be a bit of music. Helps hugely. Actually, music helps me a lot. I listen to a lot of music before certain scenes, and they're not just emotional scenes, but there could be all sorts of flavors of music that help me get into a mood. But yeah, just going over the script again and again and again, that's the primary focus at the beginning of my day's work. And then, like I say, yeah, just visually or orally something might trigger the click into it. But it's different every day. Depends what I have for breakfast.
So, two things about your Tibetan time there. What were you teaching, and what did that bring into your work as an actor?
I taught English as a language, rather than English literature. It taught me it taught me how to adapt to ever-changing circumstances. There was an age range in every class between, I think the youngest was 12 and the oldest was 55. And the abilities were almost as different as well. It taught me how to, well, it teaches you patience. Because it's very slow progress when you don't speak the mother language, mother tongue. And it taught me to be permanently inventive and improvise, actually, to just be nimble on my feet all the time. Both with, because you go in with a class structure with a way of informing, a way of stimulating, and a way of rewarding, and not punishing, but just pointing out that that's not necessarily the right or the correct way of using a word or whatever else. But so you build in those sort of tactics. So I guess I learned to be manipulative. Yeah, that's something I might have learned. Being completely honest about teaching, you have to manipulate in some degree or other. And just being endlessly inventive, actually, that was the main thing. And that was the hardest thing as well. You would sometimes out of thin air. And there was a great course, TEFL course, teaching English as a foreign language course, very well run. But it's only really applicable if you speak. I think if you speak the native tongue that you're being hosted by. So they gave us great sort of teaching lessons and methodology, but then it sort of required a whiteboard with markers, and I didn't even have a blackboard to begin with. It taught me how to make a blackboard. That's something it taught me. I got handy with my carpentry again. So yeah, I had to kind of adapt all the time. Standing in front of a class, in front of a group of kids going, and men, and all ranges of ages, going, right, I'm your sole focus of attention until I get you engaged enough to take part. I mean, I haven't done any pantomime, but I imagine audience participation might be a little bit easier because of that. But
you won't be playing wishy-washy in London this Christmas?
No, not this year, no. Maybe next year.
One of the great things about your career is, and your varied choices, is you can go from a film like The Imitation Game to your next one, The Penguins of Madagascar. Now, tell us...
Say that word again.
Yeah, we won't go there. Penguins.
Penguins.
Terrible. We all saw Graham Norton last week. Yeah. Now, in which you play a wolf. Now, tell us how you use the same discipline and preparation and seriousness to prepare for a character like that as you would for something in a drama.
Well, I went to Yellowstone Park. I completely involved myself with a pack of wolves there. I became the alpha after about 3 weeks. It was going quite well until I realised that Christian Bale and Daniel Day-Lewis were both in that pack, and it got a bit edgy, especially when Tom Hardy turned up with a shaved head. So then I had to back down a little bit, but basically, yeah, that's where I got my wolf on initially. And then it was just a matter of, costume helped a lot. I knew once I had that utility belt on that I was onto a winner. And naked apart from it. So that was good. And then it was just a question of, helping the artists to render what I was obviously doing completely in the flesh properly. And, I gave them a few steering, guidelines with the size of certain parts of the anatomy. I don't think I made many friends. There are some parts of the anatomy that are completely omitted, but that's their version of what a wolf should be, not mine. Yeah, that's pretty much how I did it.
He's made us laugh tonight. He's moved us with every performance. Ladies and gentlemen, Benedict Cumberbatch!
Thank you very much.